Hello, everybody. I am pleased to bring to you Victor Varnado, who grew up with a genetic condition that has shaped his life while also contributing to his many successes. I met him a few months ago and was frankly fascinated by him. He wears many hats: comedian, artist, businessman, author. How did he manage to thrive and flourish despite having a physical condition that others would have found too much to bear? I invited him here to explain. Here is Victor. Hello, everybody. I am so delighted to bring to you Victor Varnado. And
Hi.
Hi, Victor. I met Victor surreptitiously. He's one of his products. We were talking about it, and in the process, he started talking about his background. And the more he talked, the more fascinated I got. And so finally, at the end of it, I said, I want your product and I want you. And so here he is to tell us about himself. So, Victor, you have a phenomenal background. You have grown up with a visible disability, depending on how you look at it, and face number of challenges. So let's start from the beginning. When did you first recognize that there was something about you that was different from others?
I'd have to say the first time I ever recognized that I have albinism. I don't know if everybody's listening with audio or video. If you're video, you're probably caught up, but if you're audio, then I'm a Black person born with albinism, to two Black parents, but they have a matching recessive gene that occurs, and that is how albinism occurs. And then so I didn't really know that I had light skin and light hair compared to everybody else until I was, I would say, like 3 or 4, because I remember I was confused because I put on my hat, my grandfather's hat, and I didn't look exactly like my grandfather, and I was confused as to why.
That's funny. Okay, so what happened? Did
Well, I just realized that I didn't look exactly like my grandfather, and then I don't even think I asked a question about it. I just assumed that, okay, that's just how things are. I mean, because when you're growing up, you don't know that things are different.
right. So you went to school. Were you accepted? Were you teased? Was there an issue?
Definitely teased a lot by both Black children and white children, uh, because nobody really understood me, and I was just different from everybody. And so I always make a joke that, like, I united the races in making fun of I united the races in making fun of me. It's like where they wouldn't come together, because this is like in the 70s and 70s and 80s, and there's a lot of tension between the races, uh even now, but at that time, one thing that they could agree on, which was I was different from everybody.
So did you have a group that did you gravitate towards one or the other? Could you choose?
What I gravitated toward were just my close friends. My close friends were usually just other kids at the school who were like nerdy Black kids, were usually my close friends.
Okay, so you grew up nerdy.
Definitely super nerdy. Since I was young, I was the type of kid that would go inside Radio Shack and play with the computers all day.
Ah,
Yeah. Like, I was very nerdy. I was fond of computers.
okay. I would gather then that your teachers liked you.
No, not really. In fact, I was also tested, because they thought that I was slow,
Ah,
which is how my grandma put it.
okay.
And but what happened was that I was in school, and apparently I was intelligent and bored, and so I would just ignore the teachers. And then they thought at one point that I had mental retardation because I would just sit in class and kind of do my own thing. And then when they tested me, they found out that I was reading and writing at a college level when I was in elementary school.
In elementary school, reading and writing at a college level?
Yes.
Okay. So the teachers rapidly had to change their minds about you.
When I moved from Alabama with my mother to Minneapolis with my father, I got put in a class for gifted kids, and so that eventually woke me up some. Although I still wasn't great in school, I've never done great with structure of any kind.
So you moved from Alabama. So that was a culture shock, also, I imagine.
Definitely, Minneapolis is a very different place than Huntsville, Alabama, of course, and it was way more modern and urban than where I came from. So it took a lot of getting used to. And then my father, of course, is a very different person than my mother. My mother is very like church going and a big heart. She's got a great big heart. She's always helping people. And my dad is, I don't know if you ever heard that song, The Bad Bad Leroy Brown.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's pretty much my dad.
Leroy Brown.
That's my dad. He is drinking, smoking, has shot 3 people in his life. Like he's a rough house.
How old were you when you moved?
When I moved up there, I think I was like 12.
12. And was part of the reason you moved because you were at that 12 age and your mama said he needs his daddy?
It was actually my older brother who needed his dad. My older brother had temper tantrums. And then my mother was at her wit's end with him. And so she was like, he has to move up with my dad. And then when he moved up, I went with him, mostly out of curiosity, I guess.
So you had the choice.
I did. I didn't understand that I had a choice, but apparently I had a choice. When I was young, I thought I was supposed to go, but apparently my mother said that I didn't have to go.
Albinism. When you discovered you had albinism and it got a name and a label, how did that affect you?
Well, when I was younger, kids would straight up just call me albino. You know, like that would be how kids might even greet me. And that led to a lot of sadness and feeling ostracized when I was young. I think that albinism is part of the reason why I'm a high achiever now in a convoluted way, because I was so obsessed with fitting in. What I did was I started trying to fit in with every group. I was part of the debate club. I was on the wrestling team. I was in visual arts. I was in theater. I was in computer club. You know, I did everything to fit in. And I would also try to do it really well. So I would try to be the best in all of these things. Because in my mind, I was like, I'm tricking people into liking me. Although what actually happened was I picked up a lot of skills.
I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that you're picking up skills, you're learning survival, you're learning how to fit in with different groups.
Oh, yeah, I was really just obsessed with being so cool that people liked me. Because when I found out really, when I was moving up to Minneapolis, I found out that because I was clever, that could save me from bullies. Like if you're more clever than bullies, then you can, like if you can turn a room of people around laughing at a bully, then you can escape that bully. And so, but being clever and being adept became a thing that I would do to protect myself.
That's the Richard Pryor story.
Pretty much.
He learned comedy to protect himself. Okay, so you did the same, and that's how you became a comedic writer.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of comedians probably have that same story.
Oh, okay.
I mean, using humor to protect themselves when they're younger.
Okay. Now, another kid, Victor, in your situation, let me, a kid in my elementary school had albino, and that's what we called him, albino. He was shy and withdrawn. I only saw him by himself. And of course, I was too young to know that I'm supposed to reach out and be responsible. But he was by himself. You chose a different path. What made the difference, do you imagine?
I think what made the difference was, for me, it was just desperation. I was afraid so much at that time that I just would do anything to fit in. And so I pushed myself to do that. I wish I could say that it was some sort of courage, but at the time when I was in high school, it was mostly just like I was afraid. I was afraid of people finding me out. I would work really hard to be the best that I could be so nobody noticed that I was different and or scared. It was just a different way of solving the problem. I thought maybe the other person you met with albinism, that kid was actually more true to themselves.
Okay. So you learned to put on the front.
Definitely.
And your parents, was there who loved you? Who encouraged you to keep going?
Well, my mother has always encouraged me to keep going. My father, as I might have mentioned before, is a little more preoccupied with what's going on in his own life. So it was really my mother who encouraged me, even to this day.
Okay. So I believe having that firm foundation of being loved is what can help a lot of people overcome things. And those who don't have that same feeling have to work doubly hard to find some source of inner resources.
I think that might be true. I mean, I know that my mother is someone that I could go back to and always talk about anything. I was embarrassed for a long time to talk to my mom because when I went out into the world, I was actually really, really destitute, just like poor for many, many, many years. But I was determined to like just do what I wanted to do for a living. So I was like poor working in the entertainment industry. And it is embarrassing to go back to your mother like when you're 30 and be like, hey, help me with money. So there were some times where I wasn't even reaching out to her.
Okay, so let's do a quick jump from high school, where you're honing your comedic skills, through this period of destitution where you're trying to make it your own way. Tell us about that period.
Well, I had a very good skill, which was I could always figure out how to make money. So I was always good at figuring out how to make money. And sometimes I can make a large amount of money very fast. However, I didn't know how to save money. I didn't know how to plan for the future. I did not know how to start a business. I didn't know how to invest. I would feast and famine my whole life. Lots of money, no money, lots of money, no money. And in fact, that's actually happens with a lot of artists. Like a lot of artists are exactly like that. And I was no different. And it wasn't until like 6 years ago where I really sat down and it was like, okay, I have to figure out how I'm going to survive.
So 6 years ago, you said, oh, there's something about this money thing that I've been missing.
Yes. And then when I started learning and when I started really devoting myself to learning about it, I realized that there's a huge uh there's a huge amount of information that most people are missing about business, like how to run a business, how to make their work into a business, or how to sustain themselves. And it's shocking to me, because honestly, if you're taught how to make money, if you're taught how to run a business, it's not that hard to survive. There's so many people struggling that just don't have the skills and or the information they need. And I get I understand there's all kinds of other ways that people can struggle, but just understanding the savvy part of making money, where just like if people want something and you can give them something that is at a price that they think that it's worth it and it has value, then you can make money. And then there's so many ways that anyone could sustain themselves that we as a country don't teach people most of the time. The elite learn business, but everyone should learn.
I had not expected the conversation would take this turn, but I am so glad it is. I want to begin with your response to this statement. Money is evil. How do you respond to that?
It is not. It's money. It is not. It is a thing. Is a hammer evil? No.
Go ahead.
Yeah, is a hammer evil? No, it's a tool. Money is not evil. Money is a tool.
Okay. What about people who think that if they make a lot of money, something bad, they will get corrupted and bad things will happen?
If then that's you. That's not the money. That's you. You if you have resources and power and become corrupted, that's you. It's not the money. It's the fact that you, when you have opportunity, you are making the wrong choices. If you fear that having opportunity and or power will corrupt you, then look inside.
Okay, so I just have to remind us of this quote. The quote is not money is the root of all evil. The quote is the love of money is the root of all evil. And what you're implying is if you love the money and allow yourself to be corrupted, then that's on you.
Yeah, that's on that's on you. If you are corrupted because of money, it is because of you. Money is a tool. You can use tools without being corrupted.
Okay. There are a lot of people out there who would love to start their own business. I'm asking you to give them any 2, 3 pieces of wisdom that you can on how to switch, what they need to learn about money or about business in the very beginning to make it work for them.
It is a term that is not fun to think about, but it is super important. I say this is the most important thing that I try to convey to other artists all the time, is understanding what your profit margin is, or gross margins. To explain it very simply, in the simplest terms, a gross margin is how much money it takes you to make money. For instance, you have a store, and you bring in $10,000, but it costs you $4,000 to run the store that month. Then you make a profit of $6,000. Your gross margin is 60%. Okay, so every $4 you spend, you make $10. Most companies that are gigantic, their gross margins are 80% or more. So if you look at McDonald's, for every $2 McDonald's spends, they make $10. Now, you as an artist, for every amount that you spend, which is usually your time or expenses, you should make a certain amount of money. If you make a painting, if you're an artist and you're making a painting, this painting takes you a month to make, then and you want your gross margins to be something that is going to make you sustainable and wealthy, then it would be great if whatever it cost you to make that painting, if it was like a month of your time and a month of living expenses, say even your living expenses are $1,000 a week. Let's say that painting now costs you $4,000. So that painting, in order to be in that range, should sell for about $40,000 to be in that 90% gross margin range. Now, that doesn't mean that everything you sell has to be that, but it just means that, remember, if it takes you time and resources to make something, then it should sell at a rate that can sustain you.
I'm going to ask a really fundamental question. Why is that important? You went through feast and famine for many years without knowing this. How did knowing this make a difference for you?
Because in the past, I would do things often. I wouldn't charge people. I'd do them for the fun of it. I mean, which is fine, but I didn't realize that if I'm not functioning like that, if I'm not making more than I'm spending to survive, if I'm not making more than it takes me to make things, then I'm losing. It's never growing. This gross margin thing isn't about savings, but it's about valuing your work. And so I feel like many artists, they put low value on their work, unfortunately. But it is, I think, it can be a business.
You're talking about a mindset shift. I guess that's what I'm getting to. You're talking about a mindset shift in how you viewed yourself from the feast and famine years to when you up and decided, oh, I better pay attention to my gross margin.
Well, that was because the gross margin was because I needed to learn about business. The gross margins are just a concept that I think artists should know. My mindset shift was a very different thing. My mindset shift was all about my anxiety and trying to go beyond that. And it was also about, I had a goal for how I wanted my life to be. And in order to achieve that goal, one of the things I had to do was learn about how to make money because of my goal.
Okay, so you had a goal that in its essence was bigger than your anxiety.
Definitely.
Okay.
My goal. So 6 years ago, I was working as a producer on the Love and Hip Hop franchise. And then I had my fill of making what I call crappy television. Anyway,
Right.
I just didn't feel like I was contributing to society very much. So then I was like, okay, then what do I want to do? And then I realized that what I wanted to do was I wanted to spend as much time as possible working on or creating art masterpieces. But in order to do that, to make my daily schedule something where I could work on things that I thought really meant something, one of the things I had to do was have a sustainable lifestyle where I had the time to do that. And in order to do that, I had to make enough money so that I could have time. Because one of the thing that's most valuable is time. For instance, if you could make money and you did not have to do anything except if you could sleep in your bed all day and make money, that would be ideal, because then you could do anything you want with your time. Think about that. Just doing anything you want with your time is so valuable. But in order to be able to do that, you have to be sustained.
One of the consistent themes that have come up in these podcasts that I'm doing is people have a vision, a goal, a cause, something they want that's more important to them than their anxieties and perceived limitations and all that. Whatever it is they think is stopping them, this cause, this goal is calling them. So they have to do what they have to do to shed the stuff that's in their way. And I think that's what you're describing. So you said you
I
have
agree.
this goal. To fulfill this goal, you had to have time. To have time, you had to have money. To have money, you had to learn business.
Exactly. That
Talk to me about comedy. And I read something you did, and right now I can't remember. You used comedy to get you accepted and to ease your physical and mental pains.
mm-hmm.
Comedy also, I imagine, was used against you.
Um, you mean like when kids would tease me?
Yes.
I think that yes, definitely that happened, but I got funny fast, and so if kids were just trying to tease me, by the time I was in junior high school, I was pretty bulletproof.
By
But
junior high school?
yeah, because by junior high school, I was so good at insulting people back that it was yeah, it was difficult to make fun of me at that point.
Give an example. Give a concrete. What would somebody throw at you and then you'd counter?
Um, there was this girl who used to make fun of me in school. Her name was Sheena,
Uh-huh.
and Sheena was a very dark, and she would always come after me because people used to come after her because she was dark.
Right.
And so she came after me trying to make fun of me. And then I remember, I don't remember exactly how I said it, but she was just like something something albino, and I was like, you're so I said this in front of everybody. I was like, you're so dark, when you blush you turn purple. And that made everybody laugh at her and shut her down, so like that's just an example of just like, and that's like that's actually, I feel like that's a complicated insult for an elementary school kid.
It's
To
very
imagine a person blushing and the color turning because of the darkness of their skin and they look purple. And I think that was, I called her purple, and then I called her grimace or something like that. Yeah, it was a lot.
okay. So you just threw insults back that were funny.
Yeah, I would up the ante.
You would up the ante. So let's go into adulthood now because people use comedy to hit at people for their gender, race, ability, physical appearance, whatever. And then when the person doesn't take it, I mean, when the person gets hurt, they say, "Oh, you're so sensitive," or you can't take a joke. I was just making a joke. How should someone who's on the recipient end of that, who doesn't have your gift of comedy, what would you advise for that person to do or say
Well,
or
so
feel?
what I think you're getting at is you're talking about like how nowadays, especially with our culture, there are some things that comedians joke about and people are like, that's offensive, that's over the line,
Yes.
um and etc. uh well, I have a whole theory behind this, and I'll tell
I'm
you.
I'm sure you do. That's one of the things I wanted to hear.
Okay, so there are two extremes. One extreme is where people are like, there are certain things that you absolutely cannot joke about. Okay, that's one extreme. And the other extreme are people who are like, you can joke about anything you want to as a comedian. Freedom of speech. I can talk about anything I want. Okay. The truth is between those two areas, obviously. And this is how I determine it for myself. Uh, Two things. One, if you're a comedian and you're telling a joke that is off color about some risque subject, and people don't get it, and people think it's offensive, that's on you as a comedian. And a lot of comedians will be like, no, as a comedian, I can joke about anything. Yeah, but people don't have to like it. You do jokes that are good and jokes that are bad. If you're going to do a risque joke, it had better work, because if it doesn't work, that's on you. You chose the subject. You told a bad joke. That's on you. And I'm very confused when people are like, if people get offended that someone is offended by their joke, that's on you. You're communicating. If you didn't communicate your idea well enough, then too bad. And have I had jokes that I did and people were offended? Yeah, I totally have. and it's on me. Like, it's up to me to, if I'm going to make a risque joke, if I'm going to go out there, it had better be good. If you're going to go out that far, it had better be good. Because the truth is, some people are going to be offended no matter what. Some people are going to be offended no matter what subject you're going to talk about. So it's not about dwelling on that. It's dwelling on the communication. Your job is to communicate. If people don't get your jokes and they're mad, then, communicate. That's your job. And then people who are offended by stuff, there's, I think, two ways that people approach that. Like, there are people who are offended, like legitimately offended, because they hear a joke, it's off color, it's bad taste, not done well, and then they're offended. And then there's people who are just like, if you mention this subject, I am offended. And that's like something that, as a comedian, it's hard to deal with. So people who are at those extremes, like, there's nothing you can do. If someone is like, if you mention this word, I'm offended, then there's nothing you can do with that, really, except maybe talk to them and let them understand that they're digging their heels in at an extreme, and they're inconsolable and it's stupid. Or if someone is like, I can joke about anything and you just have to take it, you can't do anything with that person either. So it's just like, everything is really in between. People who are at the extremes, they'll always be there. They'll always be the loudest, but there's little you can do about it.
Love it. Okay, I have to think about it, because I may tend towards the right, but let's talk about this. What I'm thinking is, and what I'm agreeing with you is, I say frequently, the onus on the speaker. The
Yeah, I
onus
agree.
is not
I agree with that.
the onus is not on the listener. A speaker who says you're not listening, or you're not paying attention, well, or you're not understanding me, well, speak in a way so I can understand you. It's not like I'm not giving it an effort. So that's the part where I totally agree with you on. I also love it that you say that in the film of comedy, if you tell a risque joke and it doesn't land well, you just told a bad joke.
Yeah.
And you can't chalk it up to your freedom of speech and try to excuse your poor comedic skills to freedom of speech. You just told a bad joke.
Yeah, you told, like, if okay, look at, if we're friends and I make a joke, say, about your mother, all right?
Right.
And I make a joke about your mother, we're friends, and I tell a joke about your mother that doesn't land and you're offended, that's totally within your right. And what you're doing is, and the parallel I'm trying to draw is that your mother is something that most people care about dearly. So if you're going to joke about a subject that some people care about dearly, it had better work. There are times when I could make a joke about your mother and you could laugh with me.
Yes.
But you make the wrong joke about your mother and then you're not happy. So that's just the way it is. It's subjects that people care about very dearly. You make jokes about them, you make the wrong joke, they're going to be offended. Don't be surprised.
Love it. Now, the question that I still have that's twirling around in my head is, are there some subjects that really are just off limits? Or do you think it's all situational? It depends on whether it's a good joke.
I think it's all situational. It's just how you get into it, because you can talk about any subject, just like you can have a conversation about any subject. You can have a conversation about any subject that is appropriate, and you can have a conversation about any subject that is inappropriate. Jokes are just an extension of a type of conversation. I mean, they're a way of talking to people. And you can have a joke about any subject that is appropriate, and you can have a joke about any subject that is inappropriate. The more touchy the subject, the harder it is to walk that line. I think that, I mean, I would say that, like, yeah, I would say that you can speak about anything in a comedy set. You just have to be intelligent and communicate your idea correctly. Because if you're not trying to be offensive, because not every comedian is trying to be offensive.
Yeah.
If you're not trying to be offensive, communicate that. If you are trying to be offensive, then don't worry about because some comedians, that's what they do. They try to be offensive. And if you are trying to be offensive, be funny. And then those people who are with the offensive humor will be on your side. But then there's some people who'll never be. But you know that. So whatever.
So be willing to take your lumps also.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move to your anti-racism book. Talk about that and start off by saying how you even got into this. I'm picking up quickly that you've been in a lot of arenas. You've tried a lot of things. You've interacted in a lot of settings and topics and interests. So how did you happen to do an anti-racism coloring book?
Well, this actually comes from the whole story about when I changed the way that I function and tried to change the way that I live my life. When I started fighting against my anxiety, I started doing things, and I would say that I would do those things that I had fear of doing in the past and just push past my anxiety and try them. One of those things I wanted to try was to be a New Yorker cartoonist. And so, because in the past, I would always say to myself, I'd look at New Yorker cartoons like many people do. And they're like, this is okay. I could do better. You know, people say that a lot. And then, so I was like, well, I'm going to see if I can do it, because if I'm going to embark on this world where I'm going to try to achieve these things, I'm going to start with putting my money where my mouth is. And then, so I started submitting to the New Yorker, and it took over a year, and I eventually got my first cartoon in. And that led me to just drawing more cartoons in general. And then at one point, a publishing company came to me and was like, hey, you draw a lot of cartoons that deal with race. I had one cartoon that blew up around the internet and was one of the most shared cartoons that year. It was my response to the murder of George Floyd. And that got in the New Yorker. And then it got spread around by the New Yorker, and Viola Davis shared it. Questlove shared it. Like, a lot of people really enjoyed it. And when that cartoon blew up, a publishing company came to me and they were like, hey, would you make a coloring book? And I said, I am not interested in making a coloring book, but I am interested in making an activity book, because I felt like with an activity book, you could address more things. And then I embarked on that. I didn't understand how hard it was going to be to make a highlight style magazine activity book satiring race. And you have to be subtle, you have to be funny, and you have to make puzzles. I had to do it was more than I thought, so it took longer than I thought, but now it's here, so it's finally done.
Well, that's totally cool, and I can see you're proud of it.
I'm really proud of it. It is as I imagined it. As an artist, sometimes things do not come out as you imagine them, but this thing came out very much like I imagined it.
Okay, so I'm going to put a flash on of let's just put a pause on the recording for a minute.
Okay.
I'm going to share screen and show this. Talk to us about this.
Now, this is actually based on the cover. This is the cover of the book, and it's based on the cartoon that I did for after George Floyd.
Recognizing racism. And the black kid is saying to the white kid, I'll show you the way to
Oh
do
my God, racism is terrible. And then, so I was just like, in my cartoon, I drew two people on the mountaintop, one white person, one black person. And on the mountaintop, they're at a sign that says they've reached recognizing racism. And then the black person and the white person is really tired. And the black person is holding out their hand, trying to help the white person up the hill to where a sign points called doing something about it. Okay. So, because that's what happened in our country, which is people finally started waking up to just like the degree of racism that black people have dealt with. And then white people, I felt, were just like, oh my gosh, this is a monumental moment when we finally discovered how bad racism is for black people. And black people were like, hey, we've been here for a while. We're trying to go up the hill to doing something about it. Please join me. And so the caption under this cartoon said, actually, we're just getting started.
Oh, this is beautiful. Okay, I'm going to stop share and ask you to put in, and we'll put in the notes how to get this book for anybody who wants to get it.
Just go to antiracism.online and it'll point you to Amazon.
Okay.
And it's for sale on Amazon. You can buy it. It'll arrive in 2 to 3 days.
Okay. Lovely. And who is your intended audience?
My intended audience is everyone, actually, people who have trouble talking about race, people who think racism is gone, people who think people are overreacting, people who want to get the message across, and then people who like jokes.
Okay.
Just I really think that this is a book that everyone should see, because I found that so many people find something that affects them inside the book, and it's also funny. So it doesn't it has a conversation about race without pointing a finger.
Okay. Totally cool. Okay, so we've covered you growing up and learning how to overcome, having the sheer determination to overcome the obstacles that life threw at you. We've talked about your comedy. We've talked about your anti-racism activity book. Is there anything else that we should talk about? And business, that was very important.
I don't know if there's anything that we have to talk about. I'm just like happy to be here. I'm glad to meet you.
Yes. So tell me, what do you want people to think, to learn from your life experiences? You have a group of 20 somethings or 40 somethings or 90 somethings around you, and they're saying, tell us what you have learned for how to make it through this life when you get thrown a set of obstacles.
I think that the easiest thing to do is try to remember to be good to people. I mean, I know that that is a weird thing to say because everybody must understand that, but not enough people practice it. But something that helps me remember to be good to people is to remember that every single person that you meet, almost every person that you meet, they do not think of themselves as a villain. They're trying to do what they think is good. That's how most people think. Yes, some of people are incredibly misguided. That is 100% true. But most people, they think they're doing the right thing. They think they're being a good person, even if they're doing something that hurts you. Remember that a lot of it is just people are misguided. Everybody is as confused and as scared as you might be.
I totally second that emotion. Yes. So thank you, Victor. This has been sheer delight. I am so glad and grateful that you agreed to be here. And thank you for coming. And
Happy to be here. Thank you, Jane.
I wanted to interview Victor for several reasons. First, I wanted to know, how did he, as a young person with albinism, deal with the inevitable bullying and teasing by other kids? How did he manage to overcome that and not succumb to self-pity? Second, because he defines himself as a comedian, along with his other professional labels, I wanted to know, how did he draw the line between comedy and ridicule? And he explains that very well. He says that if you're going to make a joke at somebody's expense, better make it a good joke. I think that's so wise. It's your responsibility as a speaker. It's our responsibility as a speaker to make any of our jokes and what we say worth actually listening to. Third, I was fascinated because he's been involved in multiple businesses, and he had to convert his mindset, his self-image, from viewing himself solely as an artist to also seeing himself as a businessman who valued his time and worth. This mindset change is not easy, and yet he said he managed to achieve it and told us how. The last point is about the power of grit and determination. And I think above all, this is why I invited him for you to hear him. I've heard people say, nothing works out for me. The world is against me. The universe is against me. Victor could have easily disintegrated into that, but he didn't. And the reason he didn't, he said, is because he decided to beat the system that was against him. He was bound and determined to be accepted, and as he put it, to fool people into accepting him and liking him. And he achieved that. Now, he did have a mother and a family, obviously, that loved him, but he was able to parlay that feeling of love and acceptance that he got from his mother and use it to overcome his obstacles. I find that so uplifting. We can find within us the reservoir to overcome the obstacles, and there will be obstacles. Victor's story tells us how possible it is. Thank you for listening. I'm Jean Ladding. Check out our programs. You can find them on our website. Pathfinders, our ongoing membership program, and Changemakers, which will be forthcoming, our in-depth program on leading multicultural organizations. Thank you for listening.